Okay, kahve çıkacak. Yakup.
Jura.
Lütfen.
Bharat says, hello, everybody. Welcome to the ARPA Institute panel discussion series. This is the 12th one this year. And just a few words about ARPA Institute and its activities before we start. And I would like to let you know that ARPA Institute was established in 1992, and we just celebrated our 30th anniversary this year with a conference in the California State University, Northridge, and a banquet in the Sheraton Universal. And we have been working with the government of Armenia, with the institutes of the Academy of Sciences, with the universities and the younger generation to try to help advance education, science, technology, healthcare, and other areas, because the ARPA Institute is formed by experts from various fields. And what we do is try to find out, analyze, research, and find out what are the things that we can do within our limits, within our capabilities in Armenia that will make will make some impact, at least a significant impact on all these fields. And then we try to organize events, collect funds, and then do the program or the project. We have many activities going on right now. The first one being our invention competition, the annual invention competition for young scientists in Armenia. This year we have received 15 inventions. What we do is first ask for participation in providing a summary, an extended summary of an invention that they may present with some data of experimental or simulation data. And then those summaries will be evaluated by experts. And then we will select a few from those and ask them for full proposals. And then we try to analyze again the full proposals, evaluate them, and decide on which one we will be supporting. The first award is $5,000. And then we will continue to support the process if there is any possibility of making it into a product or a useful activity. The second activity that we have is in the Armenian National Lab, where we have established the first Class 1000 clean room. And that is, of course, for doing very sensitive research in various areas of material science, computer science, quantum technology, and many other areas. And the project is half completed in the sense that the building and the facility is now in working condition. However, we need to now equip the clean room with the proper instrumentation and the tools so that the scientists can do research and analyze materials properly and find out what needs to be done. We also have initiated the process of science fairs in Armenian schools in Armenia, all schools, all the public schools. And this year, for the second year, Armenia has been participating in the International Science and Engineering Fair that takes place in the United States. And for the past 2 years, both years actually, Armenia participated online because of the COVID situation. And the first year they even won a prize, so that was very good. We would, of course, like to expand the program to all schools, but it will take time before we can train enough teachers so that teachers can organize science fairs in their schools, and then they can participate in the county or the regional fairs, and then also eventually to the Yerevan Yerevan Science Fair. We also have other projects, but I guess you can go to our website, arpainstitute.org, and read about our activities. And if you like what we do, then please donate and participate in our activities. If you are an expert, please send us an email and we will definitely work with you. And if you have any project that you think is beneficial to Armenia, we will definitely support it. Now, we are very excited today to have very esteemed panelists among us, especially Dr. Christine Grigorian, the Ombudsman and the Human Rights Defender of Armenia, Dr. Irina Gaplanyan, who is an expert in political science and politics in Armenia, and also she's been involved in many, many different areas in Armenia, which Ani Shahbazian is going to introduce, and also our board member, Hasmik Baran, who is also a very expert educator, has been involved in the Los Angeles School District, and has been also involved in Armenia in many different projects. Ani Shahbazian is the director of the Loyola Marymount Children's Education Center, and she's a part of ARPA Institute as well. And she has worked in Armenia, helping again children's programs internationally in many different countries. And she's an author and expert. And I guess without further ado, Ani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Panosyan, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I'd like to say good morning and good evening to those of you joining from Armenia, including two of our guest speakers here today. And once again, I would really like to thank Dr. Panosyan and the ARPA Institute for featuring this conversation today about the role of Armenian women in demanding a handshake. Through their steadfast work in Armenia, the ARPA Institute continues to serve as a steady reminder to us all that progress can be made when we work together. Today's session focuses on the understanding of gender norms for women in Armenia. As we know, harmful gender norms result in many types of inequalities. Statistics on the engagement of women in the political, economic, educational, and labor fields paint a very grim picture of the role that women play in the public and policymaking arena in Armenia. Although the work of the Office of the Human Rights Defender in Armenia on the prevention of violence against women and the investigation of certain complaints shows some promise, yet the leadership roles are almost always held by men, and there's much work that needs to be done still. Our objective with our time here today is to have a discussion about these and other issues related to women's role in Armenia with three individuals who have both the credentials and the insider perspectives to answer the questions posed. I look forward to us all listening closely and engaging with our speakers. We will begin a little differently this time. We will be doing short presentations by each of the speakers in their specific field of expertise. And then I will ask a series of questions as the moderator, and then I would like to offer the floor to you. So what I don't address, you can do so by writing your questions in the chat box. And so please allow me to tell you a little bit more about our speakers here today. As Dr. Panosyan mentioned, Christine Grigorian received her BA and MA from Yerevan State University, degree in law, Northern University. Christine is the Human Rights Defender of Armenia since 2022. Previously, she was the Deputy Minister of Justice and head of the International Legal Cooperation Department of the Ministry of Justice. She also worked as a national expert with the civil society and national human rights institutions. Christine led the Armenian delegation in the UN Human Rights Committee and the Group of States Against Corruption, chaired by the Multidisciplinary Council of Juvenile Justice, organized and coordinated 2 national strategies and the National Strategy for Human Rights Protection. She was actively involved in the development and implementation of the reform strategy for RA police, including the project of introduction the patrol police in Armenia. Dr. Irina Galplanian is a political scientist, climate negotiator, and published author. Her PhD is in political science from the University of Cambridge, her master's Diplomatic Academy of London, and a BA in international relations from the University of Malta. Irina was Deputy Minister of Environment for the Republic of Armenia and now acts as a senior advisor on climate change to the World Bank Group and teaches at the AUA. Irina has worked in the UNDP, Georgetown University, Eurasia Foundation, Chapman House, and she has been a catalyst for change in sustainable business and social entrepreneurship, and was awarded a top social venture entrepreneur by the Global Good Fund Leadership Program in Washington, D.C. Last but not least, our colleague and board member, Hasmik Baran, EDD. She is an educator with a Doctor of Education in Educational Psychology from the University of Southern California. She holds an MA in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies from CSUN and a BS from the AUB. Her dissertation was on the role of ethnic culture in work-family balance among Armenian women in leadership positions in higher education. Dr. Baran is a lecturer at CSUN, the chair of the Haigazian University Board of Trustees, in the Near East Committee of Armenian Missionary Association of America, board member of the Avedisian School in Armenia, and of the Regents of Prelacy Armenian Schools in Southern California. Locally, a member of Western Association of Schools and Colleges, Association of California School Administrators, and of Prelacy Armenian Language Revitalization Committee. She has published several articles in journals, as well as participated in several academic conferences. And as I mentioned before, and Dr. Panosyan mentioned, she is a very beloved and valued board member of the ARPA Institute. Panelists, thank you for your time here today. Hasmik, we will begin with you. The floor is yours.
Hasmik, you are on mute.
Okay, is it better now?
Much better.
Yes.
Okay. My topic is about a survey of Armenian women's status in and contribution to the Armenian people. Women occupy a central place in all spheres of society. Issues, challenges, and demands pertaining to them have become agenda items in all societies and cultures. For example, women continue to face discrimination and abuse. Armenian women, as an integral part of society, whether in the homeland or the diaspora, are exposed to the same problems. Needless to say, the course of Armenian history, the evolution of Armenian society, and the emergence of new conditions and realities have impacted Armenian women's lives. I would like to change the slide. I would like to go to the next slide, Jora.
You have to change on your end.
I am.
Push the either enter or arrow down.
I am doing that.
Maybe get it out of the full view. escape.
I'll
Yeah.
do it again.
Now try.
I don't know why.
Is it not moving?
Mm-mm.
Try
On
to.
your keyboard, there's a key arrow down. Click on that, see if it works.
Page down, page up. I'm doing
Yeah,
that.
page down, page down.
Okay, I am doing that. This is the first time that happens.
Do you want to try putting it on, not not the full screen view, but so you have it on the left too?
This way. I think I will have to close the whole thing.
Do you want to email it to me, Hasbi?
Anyway, I can do without. There are just few of them at this point. I don't want to take more time. Oh, okay, here it is.
There.
Okay,
No,
still not moving.
on the left, click on it. Yeah, click on
Okay.
it. There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Needless to say, the course of Armenian history, the evolution of Armenian society, and the emergence of new conditions and realities have impacted Armenian women's lives. For example, tragedy of war, revolution, genocide, the First Republic, Soviet Armenia, the Second Republic, etc. In general, Armenian women have not come out in public protesting. Instead, they have resigned themselves to their situations. Historically, Armenian women, with their multifaceted responsibilities, have played a vital role in the Armenian communities while remaining firmly attached to their moral values and religious and national traditions. Armenian women, as mothers, have had singular importance in the thinking and life of the Armenian people. Starting from the pre-Christian period, the Armenian people have viewed the Armenian mother as the source, life-giver, breath, and vitality of the nation. In Armenian mythology, moreover, the goddess Astrig has symbolized beauty, Nane has symbolized wisdom, creativity, and caregiving, and Anahit has symbolized fertility. Mothers have been lauded for their self-sacrifice, service, and loyalty, and motherhood has been considered a supreme and sacred virtue to the extent that national phenomena are qualified with the word mother, such as mother tongue, mother Armenia, mother church, etc. As teachers, education has been one of the vital areas of calling for Armenian women. The historian Yerishe mentions that in the period following the Vartanants War of the mid-5th century, when fear and uncertainty prevailed in Armenia, the Armenian women devoted themselves to the noble task of educating the orphans. They believed that in order to continue the Vartanants War, it was necessary to educate new generations with same high spirit and vision for the future. The same was true following the fall of the Cilician Kingdom in 1375 AD. In the Ottoman Empire, teaching was one of the few occupations open to women. Armenian women made most of this opportunity by disseminating the Armenian culture and language as potent symbols of national unity. They raised funds, established girls' schools, and trained teachers. It is often said that Armenian women taught the Armenian alphabet to thousands of orphans on the sands of the Syrian deserts. After the genocide, under very unfavorable conditions, Armenian women were committed to the revival and strengthening the Armenian Christian character among the new generations. They served as role models for the subsequent generations to work hard and persevere. Armenian women as public servants. They have also participated in the political and public life of the Armenian nation. Queens and princesses have been faithful spouses and close supporters of their husbands and their advisors. In 1919, during the First Republic of Armenia, women were granted the right to vote and to be elected. In fact, 8% of the Republic's parliament members were women. Similarly, Diana Apgaryan was the ambassador of Armenia in Japan. During Soviet Armenia, there were equal rights for men and women in the work, educational, social, and economic life. Following the regaining of Armenia's independence in 1991, there's an increasingly prominent presence of Armenian women in the political field, as well as active participation of Armenian women in the efforts being carried out in the diaspora in the pursuit of the Armenian cause. Armenian women as intellectuals. Throughout the Armenian history, Armenian women have been promoters of cultural values. Many manuscripts were written through the patronage of women from the princely and aristocratic families. They erected churches and khachkars through their charity works. Armenian women made an important contribution to the blossoming of literature. All branches of arts registered great achievements through the large presence of women. In the 19th century, Istanbul and Tiflis, women intellectuals were instrumental in the construct of national identity and also demonstrated organization prowess. They developed their talents, defended their rights, emphasized their responsibilities, and boosted their confidence. During the 19th and 20th centuries, a number of authors and journalists dedicated their work to women's issues. For example, Elbis Gesaratsyan defined a woman's personal growth as rejecting stereotypes and restructuring her life by balancing rights and obligations. Marie Beylerian discouraged female dependence on males, criticized passivity, and encouraged women's social and political activism. Sirpuhi Dusab, who is a pioneer of the progressive, liberal, and feminist movements among Armenians, impacted Armenian life of the 19th century. Her ideals were freedom for women to work and pursue a career, personal choice in marriage, struggle for equality before the law, the right to opportunities in education, and active participation in the community with decision-making rights. Siran Zarifyan Kupelian, pen-named Seza, in her journal Yerdasart Hayuhi, projected the ideal young woman as socially active, economically productive, and politically engaged. Armenian women as defenders of the dignity of the Armenian people. Armenian women imbued with Christian faith and the national spirit through the ages became valiant soldiers in the liberation struggles of the Armenian people, standing by the side of their warrior husbands, brothers, and or fathers. They thus contributed greatly to the perpetuation of the Armenian homeland and people. As social workers, the role of Armenian women in the field of social work has always been pivotal. They have not remained indifferent to the needs and concerns of the Armenian people, particularly during tragic times. With exemplary devotion, Armenian women have been involved in the task of gathering and educating the orphans, taking care of the sick, providing shelter to the poor, taking care of the widows and widowers, comforting those in mourning, and providing financial assistance. For instance, we come across the names of Queen Ashken, Shushanik Bahlavuni, and many others who rendered tremendous social service to the nation. Today, we have many organizations led by women, the Armenian Relief Society, the Orphan Committee of the Armenian Missionary Association, the Armenian International Women's Associations, and church and school-affiliated women's auxiliaries, to name a few. The religious role. After Armenia accepted Christianity as a state religion in 301 AD, and the invention of the Armenian alphabet took place in 405 AD, the arts, education, and literature flourished, women were involved in the process. For example, Susan, a woman scribe, copied Yerishe's and Khorenatsi's books, and the scribe Goharine copied Naregatsi's book. Some charagans were written by women, like Sahagatuht, a poetess and composer. Many manuscripts were prepared through the patronage of women belonging to princely and aristocratic families, and churches and kachkars were erected through their charity. Armenian nuns and deaconesses participate in the social and charitable services of the church. So much historical background. What about Armenian women in contemporary Armenian society and the diaspora? Women in contemporary Armenian society still hold the multiple roles that they held historically. They have advanced further in holding leadership positions in the various spheres. In the diaspora, Armenian communities are subject to the linguistic, cultural, social, and political influences of their host countries that affect the place, position, and the role of women. In the United States, for example, there were movements, initiatives, and efforts that sought social justice. Significant events such as the feminist movement in the United States, the United Nations commitment to eliminating all kinds of discrimination and violence against women, the passage of Civil Rights Act Title II, that banned sex discrimination in the workplace, etc., allowed the legal barriers to be removed through legislation and women's increased level of education and experience. These new conditions and realities allowed the Armenian women, just like other women, to have access to higher education, obtain degrees, and become professionals. They also led them to have more opportunities to access leadership roles in many fields, including education, law, medicine, government, and so on. Women today have personal and institutional support for advancement. They have more role models to follow and mentors to learn from. These in turn encourage and inspire women to overcome their internal barriers for advancement. Policies for equity and diversity, for example, allow women to have equal access to leadership positions and education. Within the larger context provided above, research on gender and leadership styles and effectiveness suggests that women lead differently than men. They assume that gender role involves an important personality trait that influences leadership style. Similarly, decision-making styles differ between men and women. Men are more compatible with directive and analytical styles. That is, they are more task and power-oriented, very impersonal, and that women are more compatible with conceptual and behavioral styles. They are more insightful, enthusiastic, personal, adaptive, sociable, friendly, supportive, etc. Considering the 21st century leadership requirements that are based on agreement building, networking, and institution building, women's leadership style is more compatible with them. To conclude, after surveying the historical experience of Armenian women's involvement in and contribution to Armenian society, and simultaneously gauging contemporary conditions and currents, we should make special efforts to promote Armenian women in all spheres and make them equal partners in decision-making and leading the nation, whether in the diaspora or in the homeland. Only then can we have a democratic nation that can address its internal and external issues in rational, objective, realistic, and balanced ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Hasmik. Very informative. Next, I'd like to turn the floor to Christine.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, or more even good evening to everyone and from Armenia and elsewhere. And I'm glad, it's a pleasure to be on this distinguished panel. And thank you, Dr. Panosyan, for this invitation. Indeed, and thank you, Hasmik, for very insightful presentation. I would start with a couple of brief notes about our institution, what we are doing in terms of protection of women's rights, of women political and economic empowerment. First of all, to say that Armenian human rights defender is receiving and inquiring into individual complaints. This is our first modus operandi in doing this. We're inquiring into complaints. We are revealing the space where we can address, we can propose solutions for problems, and then we importantly we reveal the systemic policy legislative gaps and problems, and we are recommending comprehensive solutions to the authorities. We're doing this through our annual mandatory report to the parliament, but also we're free to publish ad hoc reports and do public statements and push for any policies. In fact, we're also mandated by the law to do awareness raising and human rights education as a very important preventive tool. And also we can challenge any legislation, any rules, regulation before the Constitutional Court vis-a-vis their compliance with the constitutional guarantees and principles on human rights. Me as a newly freshly elected human rights defender, this was also revealed by me during the election process. One of my 5 priorities is the women empowerment, and this is very close to me, and I'm working very hard on that. I'll share a presentation, a couple of slides with you, and maybe I'll skip a couple of them, being mindful of time and being sure that Irina will tackle them. Let me start by saying that as of beginning 2020, the population of Armenia was comprised of 47% men and 53% of women. 64% of population of Armenia is urban. And then a couple of figures for you to present the gender analysis by sector, and maybe I'll skip women in decision making and leadership and leaving this with Irina, but I would like to share this slide with you to tackle and to try present a picture in terms of rural and non-urban communities and sectors, by saying that we have only one female mayor among 46 urban communities of Armenia. And unfortunately, despite the reform of local governance structures in recent years, there were 2 or 3 waves. Only one of the 52 heads of consolidated municipalities is a woman. And in looking at all communities in country, those of being in total 502, only 8 women are heads of communities overall. In addition, only 9% of all local municipal councils are women. We have only one female governor, and only 2 of the 12 deputy governors are women. It is worth mentioning that due to the application of gender quota in elections to local self-government bodies, the number of women in Yerevan municipality was increased up to 32% and up to 24% in Gyumri and Vanadzor. Those are the 2nd and 3rd largest cities of Armenia. Very interesting picture we have inequality in employment field. 50% of Armenian women, and those are the figures by 2020, don't have job and don't look for a job. The number of men looking for a job has been increased, whereas the number of women looking for a job stayed the same. When it comes to the regional outlook, in all regions of Armenia, except for the Lori region, there are more people looking for a job. Here is my beloved numbers. The situation is complicated with the quite low preschool attendance in Armenia, especially in rural areas, covering only 17.2% of children. In fact, this is a root problem of unemployment or women's inactivity in the rural areas. In fact, in terms of the employment activity status, women are inactive while men are mostly unemployed. Attention, for men, employment reaches in Armenia its peak level at the ages of 25 to 39, while for women, employment reaches its peak only at the ages of 40 to 54. This situation not only keeps women out of the labor market during the years when the person is the most employable and workable, but also put them in a disadvantaged position. Women have less skills, less working experience, and the employers are reluctant to hire them by the time they are 40. The number of children also affect the labor market in Armenia and I guess elsewhere, related activities for women but not for men. For instance, a mother of 2 children experiences a 6 times higher non-participation rate in the labor market than a father of 2. This situation is also clearly reflected on the level of social perceptions, where we have, according to one of the recent opinion polls, 66% of Armenian women and 75% of men believe that it is better for preschool children if their mother doesn't work. In business, in Armenia, women-owned enterprises are smaller and disadvantaged in their access to credit, resources, and assets. The Global Gender Gap Report of 2018 highlights that 34% of all firms in Armenia have female co-owners and 24% of firms have female top managers. In education, the ratio of female to male enrollment in primary and secondary schools is 102%. Average years of schooling for women is 12.5 years when compared to 29 countries in Central and Eastern Europe and Central Asia region. However, there are more female students obtaining degrees both at bachelor and master's level. In 2019, twice as much women than men were enrolled to receive master's degree. The situation changes on the level of postgraduate studies, though. 57% of postgraduate students are women and 43% are men. The situation is opposite on the level of doctors of science. In 2020, almost twice as much men than women received a degree of doctors of science. A couple of figures in terms of gender-based violence and domestic violence. According to the recent qualified research that was done by one of our partners, 15% of asked women ever has been subject to physical violence. Studies also show that rural area women are more often subject to moderate and cruel physical violence than in our urban areas. And 45 to 59 aged women are more often to cruel physical violence by their intimate partners. During recent 12 months, cases of cruel physical violence against women has been registered in urban areas, and the frequency of cruel physical violence cases has been in general maintained during recent 12 months. What comes to the sexual violence, 7% of asked women has been subject to sexual violence by their intimate partner at least once in lifetime. Also, our studies show women in urban areas more women has been voicing about sexual violence. 42% women who has been subject to sexual violence has been subject to physical violence too. And 19 women who has been subject to physical violence has been subject to sexual violence too. Urban women are more vulnerable to physical and sexual violence. And the overall resume is that the lower women's education level is, the more she is vulnerable to sexual and physical violence. The last slide from my side is on psychological violence. 32% interviewed women has been subject to psychological violence by their partner at least once in lifetime, and it's more happening more often in urban areas than in rural. And the higher women's education level is the higher risk of them to be subject to psychological violence. In rural areas, in contrary, more widespread is the controlled behavior, which is another phenomenon. I'll stop here, but I guess during the Q&A we will have more chance to go through the resumes. Thank you very much.
Fascinating, Christine. Thank you so much for sharing. And yes, I do look forward to the Q&A because there's so many questions that are popping up in my mind. I can imagine in everyone else's as well. I'd like to turn over the floor over to, last but definitely not least, Irina.
Thank you very much, Ani. Thank you very much, dear co-panelists. It's a pleasure to be with you on this important panel. And of course, thank you to ARPA and Hakopanosyan personally for continuing these interesting discussions. And we're halfway through the year and you already have 12 sessions. This is definitely commendable. And thank you again for providing us the floor. I'll provide a very short disclaimer. I have actually given this talk or a similar talk last year in October, organized by Zoryan Institute. And when I was preparing for the talk, you know, my co-panelists were women who actually study and do extensive research on gender equality. And one other disclaimer I had is, although I have done gender-specific studies before, and I co-authored a study on understanding what were the political obstacles, or rather general obstacles, to women engaging more proactively in politics in Armenia. We published that study in 2015, and when I reviewed it in preparation for my last year's talk and for today, much of the same obstacles remain, and I will reflect on those in my brief introduction. And today's talk was more based on my experiences, not as a researcher, but rather having built on the research I've done on gender equality in Armenia, or rather lack thereof, building on my experience as a previously senior policymaker and having worked in government institutions and faced firsthand gender inequality and obstacles that women face in Armenia's various government structures and the upper echelons of the government. So let me share my screen. I have a couple of slides that I'd like to share with you. I hope these are visible, and let me make this a full slide. All right. So the reason I titled this is Demanding a Handshake. I want to give you a little bit of an introduction as to why I decided to give it such a spin, if you will. When I first joined the government, and we would be meeting high-level senior officials in different settings, you know, we would greet everyone would greet each other, and women were simply left out. Literally, women were not approached for a handshake. And for me, having come from different environments, working environments, mostly academia, international organizations, you know, for me, that was wild. You know, there I am standing alongside my peers who happen to be male, and I'm not even being acknowledged with a handshake. So that was mind-boggling. And then throughout my entire period serving as senior level official, it was kind of my side job to make sure that we elbow out our way as women in this very, very gendered space to be acknowledged as peers. With that being said, I want to come back to the state. I want to start with what is the state of play, and Christina has somewhat already provided the picture, but I absolutely love, quote unquote, this photo because it fully reflects the state of play currently in Armenia's senior government. Christina gave us numbers of the percentage of the population certainly not reflected in the highest cabinets and in the highest echelons of power in Armenia. And this is the state of play. Out of the entire senior cabinet in Armenia, we have only one minister serving. And again, a little bit of a different data, but again, showing the same pictures. So as already you saw on the photo, we have only one female minister. 5 out of 12 ministers have no deputies who are female. Out of 47 deputy ministers, only 10 are women. Parliament has a better picture because thankfully we had some legal amendments to the existing legislation that led to a better picture in the parliament and the representation of women in parliamentary mandates. So last year when I gave this similar talk in October of 2021, we still did not have a single governor, female governor. All 10 governors were male. But in November of 2021, Nazeli Baghdasaryan was appointed as governor of Shirak. But as also Christine already presented, we do not have a great picture further down into the administrative governance of Marses and the regions. So two important things. There's no public acknowledgement of this problem. And I want to be very clear in structuring this issue. Every time we hear the government talk about, and government does get criticized a lot, particularly by civil society organizations, that you don't have the right representation, and this particular administration has been elected on the promises of providing, equal representation to women. We don't have the public acknowledgement of this problem by the government. We hear excuses, which is not the way to approach an existing problem as such. And there's no discussion on how to improve this. All discussions are organized by civil society organizations, international organizations, but the government does not take the ownership of this being a problem and doesn't take the driver's seat and acknowledge the problem and organize discussions on how to improve this. So what are the key obstacles to women's political participation? Well, first of all, we already talked about this. These are gender prejudices and cultural factors. An interesting component, an interesting factor that we have found in our studies, and again, this is consistent, although the research I'd done was a few years back, is there's lack of social demand. When we did surveys, focus groups, there was clear indication that there's a lack of social demand and most frustratingly, lack of interest of women themselves in engaging in politics. This is very, very slowly changing, but nevertheless, this is actually one of the existing issues that we need to talk and acknowledge a lot. And another important aspect is lack of economic and political resources for women. Hasmik spoke earlier about existing networks, and a lot of these networks are male dominated, whether they're financial networks, political networks, clubs, etc. Male networks are really supportive in pushing for their peers to come to positions of power, whereas unfortunately in Armenia, we do not have these networks. Sexism in political culture and sexual context of the discourse on political women has been absolutely devastating for women in approaching and considering high-level political offices as their careers. Particularly women who are single and young face abhorrent sexism and sexual context, and whether this was present existing in this administration. We've seen that in previous administrations as well, coming both from the oppositions in the past and today. So it's something that we need to constantly talk about and ensure that by acknowledging that this is a major problem, to fight with that, because it definitely discourages a lot of women, in particular a lot of young female talent, to pursue high-level political offices. So the gendered experiences in policy production, as I already kind of introduced to you through my experience of, not being acknowledged as a peer, and that was immediately translated from the get-go by myself not being given a hand to shake. So public sector, particularly ministries, are staffed overwhelmingly with women. I want to present to you the context why this is and continues to be the case. And although we see overwhelming presence of women in the entire value chain of policy production in government institutions, and these are ministries including such as very conservative ministries of finance, ministries of foreign affairs, ministries of defense, and of course ministries like education and science, health, ministries of environment. You see an overwhelming percentage of women staffed across the entire value chain of policy production. The moment it comes to the highest echelon of the value chain of policy production, there are very, very few women, as statistics shows us, as the very loudly speaking images are showing. And women are left out when decisions are made, and this is plain and simple. And the body language of demanding a handshake is an important aspect of carving out that space for women to be present there. Just like a very popularly coined term of sitting at the table. Before you even sit at the table, you need to be acknowledged as a peer that is equally capable of making decisions. So sexism is perfectly displayed through body communication and greetings. And greeting is an acknowledgement. And when you start off your communication, your work, your cooperation with lack of a handshake, that consciously and subconsciously creates that disparity, creates that inequality. And a handshake, as I already said, is equal to sitting at the table. And we need to absolutely create those gendered spaces and demand a handshake. And as at the beginning of my talk, as I shared with you, I started my career in high-level public office with the acknowledgement that this is a problem, and that we need to be acknowledged at the very beginning in order to break the sexist political culture, shift the non-acknowledgement of decision-making power, and disrupt the default masculinity of leadership positions, something that we consistently face as women, whether in the corporate world or in public sector and in the private sector. The default masculinity of leadership position is overwhelming, exhausting. But I think time and again, we're facing the hard reality that this default masculinity actually leads us nowhere, and we need fresh leadership. We need leadership with female qualities that have, as studies have shown, give a much better advantage to organizations that are led by women, and of course, public offices. So some of the recommendations in conclusion, we need to support large-scale awareness campaigns. The government once in a while talking about, or rather presenting this issue with a context of excuse, well, women don't want to come to public office. That is not an approach. There has to be a large-scale awareness campaign organized by the government that it wants to engage women at the highest level political offices. And the reason I'm specifically focusing is, first of all, my research and studies were mainly focused on politics and women's presence in politics. But secondly, when you have public servants at the highest levels of the government female, then it is much easier to break those stereotypes because they are public personalities, they are seen on TV, they communicate important government messages, and this fora creates a much better opportunity to start breaking those stereotypes. Another recommendation is meaningfully engage women in public sector. Not because you pass quotas, but because you genuinely acknowledge the hard factual data in place that women generally graduate better from high school, from universities, and hence you need to hire, whether in the corporate world or in the public sector, based on merit and capacity, not on loyalty, something we've seen across the board in various sectors in Armenia. We need to support and promote women in the entire value chain of political power, from village mayors to cabinet members, and that requires a strategic approach, a visionary approach, and first of all, political will to really acknowledge this is a problem and seek solutions. We need to help create women networks. Networks traditionally are very, very male dominated in Armenia. And we start seeing that in the corporate world a little bit. And hopefully this will pick up. It's a much necessary and needed trend across the board in the country. And of course, financial and political support of women-led political organizations. This is, I think, an important factor that we do not acknowledge often enough. I'll end it there. Sorry if it was too long. There was a lot to cover, and thank you very much for your attention. Look forward to the Q&A.
Not long at all. I wish I wanted more. So fascinating. Thank you so much, Irina. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you so much, Hasmi. If I invite you to turn your cameras on, your videos on. And while Irina was speaking, there was a question, and then we could go back to the Q&A. Just want to answer. Karimian asked, is the gender representation different and more favorable in the IT sector? Anyone can answer, but it was during Irina's presentation that he posted the question.
Okay.
Or,
if I may. Go ahead.
No, just very briefly, it is, and I think it's specifically for the very reasons that I already outlined, because IT is very merit-based, right. And that allowed women to flourish. And Armenia is actually, I think, in the top 5 countries in the world with equal gender representation or good gender numbers in the IT sector. Over to Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. I will just echo what Irina said. We have quite impressive and promising representation in IT sector due to the reason that Irina already mentioned. And time to time, I would bring this example that government actors and high senior level officials are taking these examples from IT sectors to show that there are some sectors where we are managing to succeed.
So I just want to interrupt and ask, Christine, you mentioned the reason that Irina said. Irina, so you would say, why is it different? So this reward, merit, and capacity, based appointments don't occur at certain levels, but why would you say it's different at the IT level?
In the IT sector, well, first of all, because IT sector really does not know borders. A lot of your IT organizations here are foreign organizations, international organizations, and a lot of IT experts go abroad, and they also bring with them the culture of parity and equity. And then you have a very, very fertile ground for the merit-based system to actually see the day of light. And that's what we saw with the IT sector. And again, IT sector does not know borders. And I think that was the advantage where women could really perform well and show their merit. And that's what we are seeing increasingly. And in fact, I think next week, there will be an event about gender equity and gender representation in the IT sector. I think July 30th, 31st here in Yerevan.
And just to build on what you're saying, how would you expand that across the other sectors? How would you go about chiseling that and allowing for merit and competence and capacity to really be the driving forces, not just in the IT sector, but what are some dents we can all make in helping that happen?
Sure, I'll quickly respond and then give the floor to my co-panelists. I think, ultimately, some of this has to be legislated. I know that there's always has been a debate on quotas, et cetera, how effective
Right.
they are. They are instruments that work.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're talking about public offices, I think we need to continue legislating. We've done well with the parliamentary. I think we should not stop. We should legislate on these issues. Whereas in other sectors, again, I think the IT sector has shown us the success, but there's another success story in Armenia, and that those are civil society organizations. Because generally what's the civil society organizations, when you look at the leadership there, it's overwhelmingly female. And usually what they fight for is justice for human rights, justice for gender, justice for environment, labor rights, etc. And as Hasmik earlier was describing Armenian roles throughout our history, we always were the protectives, the defenders, etc. So women found themselves really flourish in the civil society sector, and it's something that's very, very encouraging. And we continue to see that over-representation of women in civil society. But once you enter private sector, obviously that's where you start facing the problems. And all of these recommendations that I gave, it has to be a systemic approach if we want to leapfrog from what we currently have.
Thank you. Does anyone want to add to Irina's comments?
Yes, if I may.
Absolutely.
Just very briefly. To say yes, I do totally agree with quotas. Those are working instrument. But I'll share with an example from the police. Recently, in the police, there was a quota of 30% introduced, and by doing the recruitment, and we end up with 6.5% recruited and appointed police officers. So our research showed that shows that it's not only quota in that meaning, in that sector, and sector by sector, we should do the analysis. What are the challenging, what are the other problems? For instance, I do find that we need to change some recruitment rules for women and do more awareness and go down to the problems and reveal them and eliminate them. It's also legislative, but it's also empowering, encouraging women to join the profession, but also creating these women networks, because those are really working. And as a human rights defender, I'm going to establish a women council. And one of the priorities is to start and target the area of law enforcement, because I truly believe that engaging more female officers in the prosecution, police, courts, investigation will really decrease the number of domestic violence, gender-based violence, and will really decrease the cases of femicides. So this is just an example to show that quotas are working, but we should not be satisfied with introducing those quotas. We should look into other barriers. This is from my side. Thank you.
Christine, thank you. I had a question for you as well regarding a different sector. So we're talking about employment, and I noticed your numbers where women's employment really peaks around 40 plus, or that's what we saw in the data. I'm wondering about equity and access in the workforce regarding policies such as maternity leave, et cetera. What exists right now, and where can we go from here?
Yes, we have on the rules, on the level of papers, regulations, laws, we have seemingly an equal situation, equal access. But in fact, in the reality, after the maternity leave, each and every woman struggles to get back into the professional level that she left. And then
how long is the maternity leave?
You might take, it's a two phase of maternity leave. One for giving the birth is 140 days. And then for the care, it's all you can take up until 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Why a lot of Armenian employed women take up until 3 years? Because there are no developed preschool coverage in the country, and other services are too expensive and not affordable for all. And then it turned out that a lot of women take these long leaves and then come back with very degraded professional level, and then they do not get support in getting back, and also they're struggling in terms of proper training, because there is no requirement in any organization for mandatory recovery training and support to those women. Another example, for breastfeeding women, there is a regulation to have the facilities in each and every enterprise.
Nice.
But we don't monitor, we don't find out, we find out very few who are providing those facilities, including the public offices. So it's not working, it's just one iceberg, but really, I think that perceptions are important, but
Yeah.
really there are some barriers also. It's not just women being not active.
So Christine, it's not enough that it's on paper. Basically, yes, it's legal,
Yes, absolutely.
not actually being enforced. So you can have no
And-
lactation set. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, and absolutely, it's necessary to engage those women who have gone through this
Exactly.
in those decisions. What else there should be done to address the situation? And one more data we forget to mention about the National Security Council, which is the most important body which takes all important decisions on security. We have no single woman there ever up until now, during our 30 years history. And there is a question, maybe we should question our male partners about the security situation we're facing.
I mean, that picture that Irina showed, talk about a picture speaks 1,000 words. But another question, I also, obviously this is my background, my doctorate is in child development and early childhood education. And I definitely, as a professor in that area, I definitely find it very interesting that there's still a very strong stigma endorsed by women that preschool is actually not the right way, not the right approach if you're a parent, that you should not be sending your children to preschool, despite all of the research on early brain development and the early years being the formative years. There's still a big stigma against sending your child to preschool and not being a mom at home. Yes. Christine, was that was in your paperwork? I just wanted to say.
Yes, absolutely. That's true, because for childcare, it's not only perceptions that it's better for females, for mothers to be at home, but also the infrastructure and access to care care services and other facilities, but also for further professional development. Those are the main alarming issues in that field.
Okay. Would you say there is childcare components? I know I've done some work in Armenia, but would you say there are childcare centers for infants and toddlers, or much less than?
Those are much less, those are very specific, and those are not responding to the real individual needs for those communities.
Working moms,
I would put this way. Yeah.
Thank you. Hasmik, would you like to add to that? I know in terms of the
what about flexible working hours? Are there any policies in place, especially lately with the remote work with COVID, etc., or the option of working from home? Are there any, in addition to the child care and also maternity leave that was mentioned?
No such flexible hour regulations in the labor code. During the COVID pandemic, that was under the emergency situation, women were working from home, but there is no such a approach, and everything is left for the contract if we're talking about the private sector. But indeed, it's better guaranteed if this is the law. In the law, this possibility is enshrined in the law. So we don't, in some, we don't have any such flexible hours or working from home possibilities in the labor code.
And I do have another question
please.
that is may I, Annie?
Yes, please.
Okay. That is related to the earlier point, and that is a lot of the data that were presented by both by Irina and Christine was pertaining to the external barriers, which involves the government or the glass ceiling, etc. And a part of it also was because of the internal barriers that was mentioned. Are there any, what are some of the things that are being done? Are there any programs? What actions or efforts are being made to make those women overcome those internal barriers that is withholding them entering into the, like seeking for a job, for example? Would any one of you please elaborate on that?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Thank you, Asmik. Very, very important question. And I think for me, when I was doing the research, that was the biggest revelation, the internal barriers where women do not want to, do not have the ambition, do not want to engage into higher level positions, whether in private sector, but my particular research focused on public office and politics at large. And this is a systemic problem, one that goes back into elementary school, middle school, and high school education, as well as the social and cultural norms. Because as I also mentioned, leadership is by default perceived as masculine. And when our girls, in kindergarten and throughout their education are taught to be quiet, and leadership is not quiet, it's loud. It's projecting voice, sitting at the table, being the first to put your hands and get the handshake, right? So it's a systemic issue. And this is something that we need to start injecting into elementary education, middle school, and then high school, and of course throughout the university, as well as start talking about these cultural norms that reduce our economic and capital in the country. Think of how much the country is losing out from these women not pursuing careers, not coming back to workforce, not wanting a higher ambition in their professional careers, where consistently women show better grades in high school, at university, in graduate schools. We see women perform better academically, but we see the flip side of that reality when it comes to positions, particularly higher level positions in the private sector. So absolutely right, Hasmik. I think that's one of the biggest problems. We can always legislate, put quotas, etc. But as Christine's example shows, this is a systemic problem requiring systemic approach that spans education, cultural norms, talking about this, and raising awareness.
Does the curriculum address such things, or are there any efforts in that regard to incorporate or introduce that into the educational system?
No, and in fact, we still have I have 3 kids aged 5, 6, and 13. So I very thoroughly watch all of their school books, and there are extremely gendered images there. With mom always cleaning the floor, whether it's they're learning Armenian, Russian, or English, right? And you have images in elementary school for literature, for et cetera, for vocabulary. It's always mom washing the floors, papa goes to work, right? So the kids are, and I'm not saying this is intentionally done, it's just regurgitation of the old school curricula, into a modern world that needs to be completely visualized for these children if we want to overcome this problem. So not to my knowledge, there is nothing of that sort, at least from my observation from the official school books of different grades.
And just to add to that, even Irina, it's so true. It's the depiction is regurgitated, but you almost have to make I know at my schools, it's almost making a conscious effort to go against the social media, the strain. So I intentionally put pictures of female police officers or male chefs in my classrooms, just to, in an effort to go against what I know, even in America, is going to be go against all the sort of sexist stereotypes. I did want to pause for a second and give the floor to Dr. Hagop Matevosyan, who's joined us today, who is also an expert on social issues. And he's asked 2 questions that I do want to make sure to address, and then also give him a few minutes to speak. Dr. Matevosyan asks, to ground these significant problems within historical and regional contexts, could you please share your thoughts on the tendencies of the issues, maybe even statistics, in post-Soviet Armenia since the 90s? And the first question. And the second question, if we locate Armenia within Eastern Europe, what kind of picture do we have?
Should I take
Yes,
this question?
please. Yes.
Okay, with pleasure. Thank you. To the first question, I don't have any statistical data on my hand, but here is my thought on that. Historically, and this is the message I push everywhere, there are many proofs in Armenian literature and also in our legal scholar textbooks, etc., which prove that equality between men and women is deriving from our tradition and not in contrary. And for instance, I bring this example a lot in Mkhitar Gosht Girk Datastani, which is the medieval 13th. It's a legal and religious scholar who put it. It was codex of the rules, mostly governing the different areas of the life, and there was a stricter sanction for a husband who is conducting the physical violence towards his wife, and twice as much the sanction in compared with the other type of beating or violence. So, and there are a lot of this kind of examples which shows that in medieval ages, even Armenian legal mind has been acknowledged the latent form of this type of violence and put more stricter sanctions. So this danger was acknowledged back then. And to my opinion, this is the mostly Soviet time of thinking, and then Soviet heritage, which got mixed in somewhere. Maybe I'm not that good in sharing this from the social point of view, but this is my thought. On the second question, maybe within Eastern Europe, we have a lot to do. Let me put this way. And the figures that we have, me and Irina have been sharing, it's a sad story, in fact, because we should do we should do a lot of systemic approach. We're lacking a systemic approach. Thank you.
I'll just add one important point. I think generally the issues that we're talking about have a very wide spectrum of problems, right? From cultural and social conditioning of women to existing barriers within workforce for women to access to decision-making positions. So it's hard to pinpoint or take one or the other. But when we look at certain statistics that particularly for me is very, very disturbing, and I am yet to see improvement of that, are the sex-selective abortions. Armenia has been trailing China globally. Okay, so in number 2 on sex-selective abortions, and since the statistics have been, taken, I think something like 45,000 women were not born in Armenia. And this is, it's hard for me to put descriptors on this situation. This is certainly very disturbing, and we are certainly ahead of the line if we're talking about Eastern Europe or Central Asian region in this part of the world. And it has so many issues related to gender equality, to social and cultural conditioning, and other issues. And again, this in itself showcases how this issue requires a systemic approach and the participation of every stakeholder in making sure that we overcome this abhorrent reality of sex-selective abortions in the country.
Very sad, especially with the declining fertility. I mean, everything coupled. Okay, Dr. Matevosyan, would you like to say a couple words? I'd love to invite you to speak.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I have to thank all the panelists for the very, very interesting, very, how to say, problematic issues that you raised, right? I mean, for the society that I also come from. Now I'm located in Germany, but of course, I'm worried what is happening in Armenia as a male, as a father, as a man, as a husband, whatsoever. What I see, what is happening in Armenia to the issues that you raised is, how to say, just putting aside as a researcher, as a scientist, but as an Armenian, let's say, this is much more important, I think, to address all these issues. I have maybe a couple of more questions to understand your positions better, and also to understand the issues that you say in a deep way. Okay.
Turn
what
on
are
your
the practical?
video, Vago, please. Turn on your
Okay,
video
can I?
as well.
I think I'm not able to switch on my camera, so.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the host doesn't allow me to switch on the camera. I mean, I have the camera, but the host in the Zoom. So, if there's any possibility, I'm ready to share it. So no problem from my side. Let me just give it a try. No. So it says that the host doesn't allow you to share your screen, and not the screen, my camera, or whatever. So I can also just go on.
Let me give you the authorization. Just one moment, please.
Yeah, sure.
I cannot find your.
I can use the time just to ask the questions.
Okay, I said you.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
me. Okay. So as a sociologist, my background is sociology and cultural sociology, and my research is on the Armenian diaspora in Eastern Europe. So that was the reason that I asked the question, just to position the Armenian society within that region. But let's make a stop and think about how to change the society. Let's imagine that we can change the society. What should be the practical steps? Of course, I know the complex issues, complex solutions. I mean, I got it, and I fully stand with you that it's a systemic and structural issue. What we have, it's not just one single solution. But let's just say 1, 2, 3. Where should we start? So that would be my first question, and the next question would be: do we have any champions, so to say, that we can say those people, those institutions, NGOs, mostly I would say, that we can rely on them to build up those networks, what Christina was telling, or to make a change in the society? Otherwise, we talk a lot, we know the problem, we know the roots of the problem, but at the end of the day, we will just go to sleep, but nothing will be changed tomorrow. That was the question that I wanted to understand, if there was any historical tendencies. All the structures are being transformed from Soviet to post-Soviet, and it will continue to go in the future decades, or we can make a change, you know. And that change, of course, it's not going to be within a week, within a year, but perhaps, as Irina was telling, a policy. What kind of policy do we need? Yeah, maybe I should make a stop here. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Who would like to address that? Christine?
I will take that. Yeah, I will, if you don't mind.
Please.
Well, a great question, and this is my beloved part, being practical and going to the actions. Well, I can bring the example in terms of law enforcement. I've studied the legislation. Indeed, for prosecution and investigation, we need quotas. This first. Second, for police, we need quotas, but we need, those are there, but not being filled. We need also to change the sub-legislation. There are rules for recruitment for women who are not being, who are influencing their selection unproportionately. And for instance, I'm talking about the height. There are the same criteria for height for women and men police officers, and this is well-known fact that women as a sex, those are more that there are differences. Next, for women, we should create a women in law enforcement network. Networks are very helpful, practical, and can empower other women, can do this club thing, networking, etc. Those networks should be under the auspices of important decision-making power, but should be led by women, should have resources. Mentorship is very important in the law enforcement, and we know from our practice that in the male-dominated area, the mentorship of women, another women, or another male officer is very important for a newcomer, for a female newcomer, and but this is another remedy that can be used. Next, dedicated, targeted, qualified focus groups with women on duty, women officers on duty, to reveal the problems they are facing and go to solve them. Those are very practical issues. And then targeted awareness raising campaign and visiting particularly the marginalized regions where inequalities, or for instance, sex selective abortions have the higher rate. For instance, the Gerarkunik Mars. This is the higher rate. Here we have the higher rate of sex selective abortions. We have higher rate in domestic violence, where mostly almost 90% of women are survivors or victims are women. So those are maybe a couple of things that we have concrete ideas. And I think leadership is very important, and we need more males to be in those leadership and promoters role, rather than having only women and being gathered only women talking about women's rights and going home. No, we need more males, more men to talk and to empower women. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Christine. There are a couple more questions that have been posed. One is, are there women's organizations in Armenia? And if not, why not? I know you mentioned you were going to create a council, Christine. And also the second question, are there, or what percentage of the new startups are by women?
Well, I don't have any figures in terms of new startups. In terms of women organizations, there are a lot of civil society organizations who are who are promoting women's rights, who are fighting against domestic violence, gender-based violence, etc. But for you to be clear, that we have a women council at the cabinet level, which is in fact inactive. Those are being like, it's a very formal organization. I have been there once, and then I decided never to go there, because it's like collecting some statistics, very nice, and then like making very good statements and going home. Nothing happens.
So thank you. Annette Sahakyan asks, in relation, sort of related to this question, is there any sort of support network system available to women? Coaching, mentoring, etc. Anything, a sense of community and shared experience can be helpful to overcome some of these obstacles, i.e. you're not alone. This is how I handled it. This is maybe how you can.
In fact, I don't know any domain where we have such a network, and that's why I was mentioning this for law enforcement, women in uniform or women in law enforcement, and particularly women in armed forces. Here we have another opera. And then about coaching and mentoring. There are some development partners who are doing this, particularly UNFPA, UNDP. Those are temporary projects. I happen to be twice in those projects doing mentorship for women. And we're going to continue this in this office as well. But the mentorship I was talking about was more professional, more from the same profession, same domain, not like being more general. That was my point.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. Irina or Hasmi, did you want to add anything to that? If not, I can ask a couple more questions.
I just wanted to come back to Jakob's question. I think it's very important. So we've outlined all of these problems. So how do we resolve them? And I want to reiterate again that this is a systemic problem and it requires a systemic approach. And adding on Christine's points, I think it's absolutely paramount to have a strategic framework on this. You know, a policy document that's developed by the government, acknowledging that there's a problem, and providing systemic solutions. And these should start from education. You know, we have to have gender mainstreaming in education and in our curricula. We have to review all of the books and all of the imaging in the books that can communicate anything but gender equality. And this is still at a very, very rudimentary level. You know, I don't think there have ever been reviewed on how gender unequal our education materials and schools are. So mainstreaming gender into the planned education policy framework would be absolutely important because you tackle the problem at the root cause, because you know, whether internal or external barriers for women in approaching and having stronger ambitions about their careers, we have social and cultural conditioning being the biggest obstacle. Right. And then coming back again to the issue of, you know, how do we create this networks? How do we support women? Women need to be educated enough and aware enough that there is a problem if they're mistreated at workplace. There's a problem if they're going through physical, psychological, or sexual violence. You know, so we are at a stage where we're still lacking the necessary education and necessary awareness of our society to position this as an issue and as a problem that needs to be addressed. So definitely we need a policy framework that will be tackling education, reforms, you know, gender sensitive budgeting. You know, that's another big issue. And our development partners have been discussing this with our government. There seems to be commitment, but not moving forward on this. We need to understand how, when we collect our taxes, how much goes to women and how much goes to men, right? So again, a policy framework, a document that addresses this as a systemic problem, which it is.
And I wonder, Ani, can I?
Yes, please.
Obviously, we did discuss or mention, you know, expecting from top down, you know, policy or systemic change. To my knowledge, after 1991, I think a big number of NGOs and civil society were registered in NGOs, and I've read that those NGOs have been led by women. Is that, you know, and in thousands, those NGOs, the numbers were in thousands. Are those, or how many percent, or are they still effective, or it's just a number registered in terms of the NGOs that could do sort of a bottom-up difference, that could make a difference in these regards?
Yeah, those are indeed in thousands. There are many, and as I noted earlier, I think it's very encouraging that we see very pronounced female leadership in civil society. And actually, what I have noticed in some of the research I read, after there were some legislative amendments done to our law on non-governmental organizations, allowing them to conduct commercial activity, That actually has been very successful, because one of the issues women that lead civil society organizations previously faced is, they couldn't generate any income through their NGOs. This way, they were able to do important civil society related, community related work, but at the same time also generate some income. So that's certainly a good progress that we've seen, and we continue to see that, particularly in communities. Civil society organizations, particularly women-led civil society organizations, are quite effective. They not only raise issues and raise awareness about existing problems, they also create jobs, which is important for those communities.
I just wanted to ask, in endorsing a policy, systemic, a more overarching framework to address, which definitely needs to happen systemically, but what, to add to that, as sometimes it helps encourage or facilitate that, what can we do in terms of the micro acts that we can do to help push the culture a little bit forward as individuals? What can each of us do, men and women, if we're trying to shift this culture? What would you recommend each of us do to help that shift?
Thank you, Annie. It's a very important question. I have very simple idea, and I keep telling this and sharing with the audience I'm meeting with, is changing our micro environments. Yes. This is the way I see. If each and every person will try to influence the change in 5 or 10% who they know, she knows, or he knows, and then we will end up with changing micro environments and getting better and better. This is each and every person's responsibility. I guess it's not the state should do its work, it's true, but we have also responsibilities too.
So these micro changes to affect the macro, more hegemonic, right, counter the hegemonic norms. Okay, great. I think that's true. Looking at your micro environment and how you are promoting these gender norms. In fact, one of the questions I had for Hasnik was, what is the role of social media in promoting women's status in society as an integral part of the workforce, or, in fact, in all spheres of life?
From what we observe from the television, print press, internet, etc., a lot of journalists are women, influencers, IT startups, government officials, right, etc. In my opinion, besides pursuit as a career, they should also be cognizant that there's a mission addressing women's issues, educating the public, changing the perceptions, all the perceptions and mindsets. Changes, although, should not necessarily mean to discard the national, cultural, or the spiritual values. In other words, change and, as much as we emphasize and focus on the change and modernity, we should also be mindful that they should not be to the detriment of the Armenian identity as well. We said it starts in individuals or the socialization patterns, but also we really need to keep in mind that our identity is not jeopardized in that sense.
Thank you.
So the social media does a lot and has a lot to do.
As we saw with the war, and to transition into, actually a good segue, Armen Marsubian asks, how has the Karabakh war impacted women, especially women who have been made refugees from their homes from Artsakh? Does gender inequality impact them more?
I would take this question first and to say that in this capacity, I meet a lot of women, displaced women from Karabakh, and I can really say we are, in fact, we're collecting their needs, their problems, and trying to propose to the government, to the parliament, comprehensive approaches and policies that might be changed. But also we're advising on practical aspects, because sometimes governments, our government is doing supporting or cash assistance or other social projects that aim to support those displaced persons, but those programs are uninformed about the needs, real needs that persons have. So yes, absolutely, women, displaced women are influenced twice or three times more about all of difficulties, and those relating to their children's education, how they get to the good schools, how they are struggling with this trauma. For those women who are themselves who are struggling this trauma, they should help their families, their children, not to feel discriminated in the schools, because there are a lot of cases when people are making this kind of differences. Oh, you are coming from Artsakh, you are speaking in a different way Armenian language, etc. And then the social impact is great. Those are mostly materially unemployed, or I don't know, families with social problems and material problems, and also unemployment rate is very high. But besides women who used to work there, for instance, they were teachers, medical workers, etc., they tend to be unemployed here and no access to labor market, because there are not enough places, vacant places here in Armenia for them. And also they need this professional adaptation trainings and help to have this access to the labor market, but also to gain new professions, new skills, to enter in a different way. Maybe this much from my side. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any concluding thoughts they want to add?
You mean to this question or overall?
Either one, both. You can add to this question and then overall.
I guess I'll just add an overall concluding remarks, thanking again ARPA, Dr. Hako Panosyan, but I think equally, if not more importantly, Ani, I want to thank you. You have always been a gracious moderator of these panels, and given your time, thank you so much for this opportunity and providing the platform to voice such an important topic, because I believe that if we do not engage women equally in all opportunities, from defending our borders to making political decisions at the highest level, we will continue to lose. And this is a time when we're frank about it, we talk about it, and we engage the talent we have across the board with emerging young women. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hasmi?
I think this was a great panel. Being in the diaspora, I think diasporan women should feel more fortunate, especially in the United States, that we do have all the support, whether it is legislative or otherwise, to overcome those the barriers, whether it's external or internal barriers. We are lucky to do that, and I stated in my presentation also that we do have a great number of women in leadership positions, specifically in the field of education and so forth. And I know that there are many organizations here, women's organizations that are in contact, that are in support of advancing women's issues or helping them. If there are any other ways that we are here to support whatever is needed to be done in the homeland. We are here with all our efforts to help.
Thank you. Christine?
Yes, thank you very much. I thank to all my co-panelists and participants. Thank you for your time. Thank you for great interaction and exchange. And thank you, Arpa and Dr. Panosian, and also Ani. Huge thanks to you for navigating us so professionally and wisely. And I hope that next time when we will be talking about women issues, we will have something positive to share. There are some positive things, but indeed, this is our starting point, and I hope we will have something to share. Thank you.
I want to thank the three of you. Not only have the three of you shown us that you can succeed if you're a woman, but you can make Armenia so much better. So thank you each for helping us be so much of a better nation. And thank you for taking these hard questions. And thank you to all of you for watching and for your continued interest in our homeland, in our motherland. Thank you from me, Ani Shahbazian, and the whole team here at the ARPA Institute. Dr. Panosian, the floor is yours. Where is Dr. Panosian?
You're muted, Hago.
Oh, thank you, Ani. Thank you, Irina and Christina and Hasmik for an excellent discussion. And thank you, Dr. Matevosyan, for your participation and your input. Our next event, we are hoping we will have a lecture by Archbishop Zekean on the Naregatsi as an international scholar and value in August sometime. We will let you know. And in September, we will have a panel discussion on the importance of technologies for the advancement of a language, specifically Armenian. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.